Non guarder lai, dice la donna Apache, ma il ranchero continuo, y fis qualcosa chi lo fis arabier. This land had seen many years, many footsteps, and many stories, though most of them were never written down. The wind moved gently, as if it was careful not to disturb the memories resting there. The Apache woman had been awake since early morning. She lived close to the land, not in a large house, but in a simple shelter made strong by careful hands and long experience. Her life was quiet but not empty. Every sound meant something to her, the cry of a bird, the movement of animals, the way the air felt on her skin. She knew when something was normal and when something was not. She was not old, but her eyes carried the weight of many seasons. They showed that she had seen both kindness and cruelty, hope and loss. The land had taught her how to survive, but it had also taught her how easily peace could be broken. For her, the land was not just soil and stones. It was memory. It was truth. As the sun climbed higher, she noticed dust rising in the distance. At first it was faint, almost blending into the dry air. She stood still and watched. Slowly, the shape of a man on horseback became clear. He was riding with purpose, not wandering. She could tell from the way he sat tall and moved forward without hesitation. He was a ranchero, a man who worked the land in his own way. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots strong, and his hat wide to block the sun. He had spent his life believing that hard work and courage were enough to face anything. The land, to him, was something to be used, measured, and owned. When he reached her, he stopped his horse and looked around with sharp eyes. He did not greet her with warmth, but he was not openly rude either. He asked if she had seen any cattle passing through the area. His voice was firm, carrying the confidence of someone used to giving orders. The woman listened carefully. She could sense his impatience, his need to control the situation. She answered calmly, telling him that cattle sometimes passed nearby, but not often. As she spoke, her eyes moved toward the distant hills without her meaning to. For a brief moment, fear crossed her face. The ranchero noticed this small change. He followed her gaze and frowned. He asked what lay in that direction. The woman quickly looked back at him. Her body became tense, like an animal sensing danger. In a low but clear voice, she said, "Non guarder lai." He did not understand why she spoke with such seriousness. To him, it sounded strange, maybe even dramatic. He asked her why he should not look. His tone was curious, but also slightly mocking, as if he expected a simple answer. The woman did not explain. She only repeated the warning, her eyes now sharp and focused. She told him that some places were not meant to be disturbed, and that looking was the first step toward trouble. For a moment, silence stretched between them. The wind picked up, moving dry leaves across the ground. The ranchero felt something uncomfortable in his chest, but he pushed it away. He believed fear was a weakness, and warnings without explanations were nothing more than stories meant to control others. He thanked her briefly, though the words felt empty. He turned slightly in his saddle, still facing her, but his eyes kept drifting toward the hills. He noticed how still the woman stood, how her hands were clenched at her sides. She had seen this before. Men who did not listen, men who believed they knew better, men who thought the land belonged to them simply because they walked on it. Her thoughts went back many years. She remembered a time when her people lived more freely on this land, when respect was not something that needed to be demanded. She remembered loss, moments when curiosity and pride had led others to pain that could not be taken back. The ranchero asked one more question about his cattle, but his attention was no longer fully on her words. His mind was working, building ideas, feeding his curiosity. The warning only made the place more interesting to him. She answered shortly this time. She could feel that he had already made up his mind. When people reached that point, words rarely helped. As he prepared to leave, she stepped closer and repeated the warning once more, this time stronger. She told him that some knowledge came with responsibility, and not everyone was ready for it. He nodded, but there was a small smile on his face. It was not cruel, but it showed disbelief. He believed he was being polite by listening, even if he did not agree. The ranchero turned his horse and began to ride away. The woman watched him closely. She felt a deep sadness settle in her chest, mixed with anger. She knew what often followed moments like this. As he rode, he slowed slightly, almost without realizing it. His eyes moved again toward the hills. The land looked quiet, peaceful even. Nothing about it seemed dangerous. He wondered why the woman reacted the way she did. He told himself that people like her lived too much in the past. Behind him, the woman remained standing. She did not call out again. She knew that warnings only worked when someone was willing to hear them. All she could do now was wait and hope that he would choose wisely. The sun continued its climb and the land returned to its usual sounds. Yet something had changed. A line had been drawn, even if only one person could see it. The warning had been given, and whether it was respected or ignored would shape what came next. The story of that day did not end there. It was only the beginning, a quiet moment before actions replaced words. And in that silence, the land itself seemed to hold its breath. The ranchero rode away from the woman's shelter, but her words stayed with him like dust that refused to settle. At first, he told himself it was nothing. He had heard many warnings in his life, about weather, about land, about people, and most of them had come from fear, not fact. He believed a man should see things with his own eyes. That belief had guided him for years and had never failed him, at least not in ways he was willing to admit. As his horse moved forward, the land opened up in front of him. The ground was dry but familiar. He knew these paths well, or at least he thought he did. He had grown up learning how to read the land in his own way, looking for tracks, signs of animals, changes in grass and soil. To him, this was skill. To him, this was knowledge. Yet today something felt different. The wind seemed uneven, stopping and starting without reason. The birds were quieter than usual. Small details he normally ignored began to catch his attention. Still, he pushed those thoughts aside. He blamed the heat, the long ride, the worry about his missing cattle. His mind returned to the woman. The way her voice had changed. The way her eyes had darkened when she spoke those words. He wondered what she was hiding. Was it superstition? Was it a trick to keep him away from something valuable? Or was it simply a story meant to scare outsiders? The more he thought, the more his curiosity grew. He did not like unanswered questions. They made him feel weak, as if someone else held knowledge he did not. That feeling bothered him deeply. After riding for some time, he slowed his horse and stopped near a small rise in the land. From there, the hills were clearly visible. They looked no different from any other hills, rocky, quiet, untouched. Sunlight rested on them gently, casting long shadows. He remembered the warning again, non garder lie. He almost laughed at himself for feeling uneasy earlier. He felt foolish for giving any weight to the woman's fear. See, he thought, nothing at all. As he rode, he noticed old marks on the ground, faint shapes, half covered by dust and time. He dismounted and examined them. They looked like remains of an old camp or gathering place. Stones arranged carefully, wood long turned to dust. It was clear that people had once been here. Instead of stepping back, he stepped closer. He touched one of the stones with his boot, pushing it slightly out of place. To him, it was nothing, just an old rock in an empty land. He looked around, half expecting someone to appear and stop him, but no one did. A strange feeling passed through him then, not fear exactly, but discomfort. The air felt heavier. He stood up straight and looked around again. Still nothing. He shook his head, annoyed at himself. Stories, he muttered quietly, just stories. She had returned to her daily tasks, but her thoughts were not at ease. She could sense that something had shifted. Years of living close to the land had taught her to trust such feelings. She remembered the ranchero's smile, the one that did not reach his eyes. She had seen that look before, many times. It was the look of someone who believed respect was optional. She whispered a short prayer, not to change what was already happening, but to prepare herself for what might come. Back near the hills, the ranchero found a small object partly buried in the ground. It was simple, worn smooth by time. He picked it up and turned it in his hand. He did not know what it meant, only that it did not belong to him. Instead of putting it back, he slipped it into his pocket. That small act changed everything, though he did not know it yet. As the sun began to lower, shadows grew longer. The land felt less open now, more closed in. Sounds seemed distant, as if they were being swallowed by the earth itself. His horse shifted nervously, stamping the ground. The ranchero decided it was time to leave. He mounted his horse and turned back toward the path he had taken earlier. But after riding for some time, he realized something was wrong. The landmarks he expected to see were not there. The land looked the same in every direction. Annoyance rose in his chest. He was not lost, he told himself. He simply needed to adjust his direction. He turned again and rode, this time faster. Still, nothing looked familiar. His confidence began to crack. He slowed his horse, trying to calm himself. He told himself to think clearly, to remember the land as he always had. Yet the harder he tried, the more distant his memories felt. For the first time, the woman's warning returned to him, not as a challenge, but as a truth. He stopped and listened. The land was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. No birds, no insects, just the sound of his own breathing and the horse's shifting weight. A sense of shame crept into him then. He realized that he had not only ignored the warning, but had acted with carelessness. He had treated the land as empty when it was not. As darkness slowly approached, fear finally found a place in his heart. Not loud fear, but a quiet, steady fear that did not fade easily. Far away, the Apache woman stood and looked toward the hills. She did not smile. She did not feel satisfaction, only sorrow. She knew that curiosity without respect often led people down paths they could not easily leave. She had tried to stop it with words. Now only actions would speak. The land, patient and ancient, waited. Night came slowly, like a dark cloth being pulled across the land. The sky lost its colors one by one, and the last light rested briefly on the hills before fading away. The ranchero remained still, sitting on his horse, unsure of which direction to take. The quiet around him felt thick, pressing against his thoughts. He had always trusted his sense of direction. Even as a boy, he could find his way back home without help. That skill had made him proud. Now, standing in a place that refused to look familiar, that pride began to weaken. He guided his horse forward carefully, letting it choose the path. Animals, he believed, knew better than humans sometimes. But the horse hesitated, its ears moving back and forth, its steps slow and uncertain. This made the ranchero uneasy. He had never felt his horse behave this way before. "Easy," he said softly, though his voice did not sound calm to his own ears. They moved only a short distance before the horse stopped again. The ranchero looked around, trying to find something he recognized. Every rock looked the same. Every shadow seemed to shift when he stared too long. He felt a sudden urge to reach into his pocket. His fingers touched the small object he had taken earlier. He pulled it out and held it in his hand. In the dim light, it looked older than he had first thought. Smooth edges, careful shape. It felt warm, even though the night air was cool. A strange feeling passed through him, like a memory that was not his own. He quickly closed his hand around the object and put it away. He did not want to think about it. Hunger and thirst began to remind him of their presence. He had not planned to be out this long. His supplies were limited. He told himself that once the sun rose, he would find his way easily. Night only made everything confusing. Still, sleep did not come easily. He tied his horse to a strong bush and sat on the ground, his back against a rock. He kept his hat low and his eyes open. Every sound felt important. When the wind moved, he listened. When a small stone shifted under the horse's hoof, his heart jumped. His thoughts returned again and again to the Apache woman. Her eyes, her voice, the way she had stood so firm when she warned him. For the first time, he wondered what it had cost her to speak that warning. He wondered how many times she had seen men like him make the same mistake. The land around him did not feel angry, but it did not feel welcoming either. It felt watchful. Hours passed slowly. The moon rose and climbed. Shadows stretched and moved. The ranchero's thoughts became heavier, pulled down by regret he did not want to face. He realized that his trouble had not begun when he became lost. It had begun when he chose not to listen. At some point, exhaustion won. His eyes closed, though his sleep was light and broken. He dreamed of walking paths that kept turning back on themselves. No matter how far he went, he always ended up in the same place. When he woke, the sky was pale with early light. The cold of the night still clung to the ground. His body ached and his mouth was dry. He stood slowly, stretching stiff muscles, and untied his horse. Morning should have brought relief, but instead, confusion deepened. The land still looked unfamiliar. Even worse, the hills now seemed closer than before, though he was sure he had not moved toward them. A tight feeling formed in his chest. He mounted his horse and rode forward, choosing a direction at random. After a while, he stopped again. The same rocks, the same broken bush. He had passed this spot before. Anger flared inside him. He kicked the ground with his boot and cursed his luck. He blamed the heat, the land, even the woman. Anything but himself, but anger did not help. It only drained his energy. As the sun climbed higher, the heat returned. His horse grew tired. The ranchero felt weak, his thoughts slowing. He finally admitted what he had been avoiding. He needed help. Swallowing his pride was harder than facing the unknown land. He had always believed asking for help meant failure, but now, alone and disoriented, that belief felt empty. He turned his horse back toward where he thought the woman's shelter might be. This time, he did not rush. He moved slowly, carefully, paying attention to every detail. He spoke softly to his horse, keeping both of them calm. After what felt like many hours, he saw something familiar in the distance. Smoke, thin and steady, rising into the sky. Relief washed over him so strongly that his legs nearly gave way when he dismounted. He guided his horse forward, following the smoke. With each step, the land felt lighter, as if a weight was slowly being lifted. The Apache woman stood outside her shelter as she had the day before. She did not look surprised to see him. It was as if she had known he would return. The ranchero stopped a short distance away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He removed his hat, holding it in his hands. The gesture felt important. "I was wrong," he said at last. His voice was rough but honest. "I should have listened. I thought looking was nothing. I thought touching was harmless." Instead, she closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "That object does not belong to you," she said. "It carries memory. But understanding is the second." When she finished speaking, she looked at him again. "The land tested you," she said. "You are still here because you came back." "Remember what you learned," she replied. As he rode away, the land began to look familiar again. Paths opened. Landmarks returned. It felt as if the world had shifted back into place. But the ranchero knew he was not the same man who had first ridden toward the hills. Something inside him had changed, and the land, ancient and patient, had made sure he understood why. The ranchero followed the path the woman had shown him. At first, it looked no different from the others: dusty ground, small stones, dry plants. But after a short while, familiar signs began to appear. A bent tree he remembered, a stretch of land where the soil changed color. With every step forward, his breathing became easier. He did not rush. This time, he allowed the land to guide him instead of trying to control it. As the hours passed, his thoughts stayed quiet. He kept remembering the woman's words and the calm strength in her voice. He realized that she had never tried to frighten him. She had tried to protect him from the land, yes, but also from himself. By the time he reached the edge of his ranch, the sun was low in the sky. Warm light covered the fields, and the sight felt different than before. The land he had known all his life now seemed larger, deeper, filled with things he had never noticed. He found his cattle not far from home. They were safe, grazing calmly as if nothing had happened. He watched them for a long time, leaning on the fence, feeling both relief and shame. He had risked everything over curiosity and pride, when the answer to his problem had been simple all along. That night, he returned to his house but did not sleep well. His body was tired, but his mind remained awake. Every time he closed his eyes, He saw the hills and felt the quiet weight of the land watching him. He thought about how close he had come to losing his way completely. Morning came, and with it, a decision. After finishing his work for the day, the ranchero prepared a small bundle of supplies, water, food, and a simple cloth. He did not tell anyone where he was going. Some things needed to be done without an audience. He rode back toward the woman's shelter, but this time his pace was slower and more careful. He stopped often, taking in the land, noticing details he had ignored before: birds lifting from bushes, the way the wind changed near the hills, the quiet balance of everything around him. When he reached her place, she was seated outside, working with her hands. She looked up as he approached, her expression calm. He dismounted and stood a respectful distance away. "I came to thank you," he said, "and to ask something. And it takes listening." Truly listened. For the first time, he allowed himself to learn without trying to prove anything. He began to see how much he had missed by believing he already knew enough. The hills were never mentioned again, but their presence remained between them, quiet and firm. As weeks passed, the ranchero changed his ways. He stopped riding wherever he pleased. He treated certain areas with care, even if he did not fully understand why. He taught his workers to do the same, not through fear but through explanation. Some laughed at him. Others questioned his reasons. He did not argue. He simply said that the land gave more when it was respected. Over time, something unexpected happened. His ranch began to thrive in quiet ways. The soil held moisture better. The animals stayed healthier. Even when seasons were harsh, his land endured. People noticed. They asked him what he had changed. He told them the truth, that he had learned to listen. One evening, long after the first warning, he stood at the edge of his land and looked toward the distant hills. This time, he did not feel curiosity pulling him forward. He felt understanding holding him back. He removed his hat and lowered his head slightly, not in fear but in respect. Far away, the Apache woman continued her life as she always had. She watched the land and felt its balance slowly return. She knew not every warning was heard, but one had been. Sometimes that was enough. The story of the ranchero spread quietly, not as a tale of loss, but as one of learning. It reminded those who heard it that strength was not found in ignoring warnings, but in knowing when to stop. And the land, ancient and patient, remained, holding memory, offering lessons, and waiting for those willing to listen.